6 months ago, I walked out of that silo thinking I'd escaped, thinking the nightmare was over. I watched them burn it down, saw the flames reach 300 feet into the sky, smelled the smoke for weeks afterward. I was so sure we'd killed it. I was wrong. The fire didn't destroy anything, it just released it. Sent millions of spores into the atmosphere, carried them on the wind across 3 counties, and now it's everywhere. In the soil, in the water table, in the food supply, in the people. My name is Marcus Chen. 6 months ago, I was a safety inspector. Now I'm something else. Something I don't have a name for yet. And if you're hearing this, if this recording somehow made it out, you need to know what's coming. Because the grain elevator was never the source. It was just the first door to open. And now all the doors are opening. The first 3 months after Hartfield were complicated. Officially, I was a hero. The brave safety inspector who'd discovered critical structural failures at the grain elevator before it could collapse and kill dozens of workers. The county gave me a commendation. The local paper ran a story. My boss talked about a promotion. Unofficially, I spent those 3 months in and out of psychiatric facilities. See, when you walk into an ER covered in blood that isn't yours, rambling about underground fungal networks and people being consumed from the inside out, they don't give you medals. They give you sedatives. The official report said the Hartfield Grain Elevator suffered a catastrophic mold infestation that released toxic spores, causing severe hallucinations in anyone exposed. The 17 people who died, including my colleague Sarah, including operations manager Thomas Weber, they were victims of acute mycotoxin poisoning. The fire was ruled necessary containment. No mention of the roots. No mention of the things I saw in that silo. No mention of the way Thomas's body had smiled at me as it dissolved into the grain. They tested my blood, found elevated levels of something they couldn't identify. Likely fungal metabolites, the report said, should clear from your system within 6 to 8 weeks. It's been 6 months. The levels haven't dropped. If anything, they've increased. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the day everything changed again. It was a Tuesday, late October. I was finally back at work, doing routine inspections of grain storage facilities across the county. Light duty, they called it. Nothing too stressful, nothing too triggering. I was driving down Highway 34, about 20 miles east of where Hartfield used to stand. The land out there is flat, endless fields of harvested corn and soybean stubble stretching to the horizon. In the late afternoon light, it all looks golden. Peaceful. I'd learned to hate that kind of peaceful. My phone buzzed, text from my doctor, Doc Patricia Okonkwo, the only psychiatrist in the county who didn't think I was completely insane. She'd been checking in regularly, monitoring my adjustment. The message read, "Marcus, call me immediately. It's about your latest blood work." I pulled over at a gas station to call her back. The station was one of those dying rural outposts. 2 pumps, a convenience store that sold more hunting licenses than groceries, a hand-painted sign advertising live bait. "Dr. Okonkwo, it's Marcus. I got your message." Her voice was strange, controlled, but with something underneath. Something I'd only heard once before, in my own voice, the night I escaped Hartfield. "Marcus, I need you to listen carefully. Where are you right now?" "Highway 34. East of town." "Why? Are you alone?" "Yeah." "What's going on?" There was a pause. In that pause, I heard her take a breath, the kind of breath people take before delivering bad news. "Your blood work came back. The compound we've been tracking, the one we assumed was residual mycotoxin, it's not decreasing. It's organizing. Organizing. The molecular structure is changing, becoming more complex. Marcus, I've never seen anything like this. It's almost like it's forming patterns. Intentional patterns. I felt the world tilt slightly, that familiar vertigo I'd experienced in the silo. What kind of patterns? I don't know. But I sent your samples to a colleague at the university, a mycologist named Raymond Voss. He specializes in fungal networks, and Marcus, he wants to meet you. Today, he says it's urgent. Why? Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice had dropped to almost a whisper, because you're not the only one. He's found the same compound in 11 other people across 3 counties. And Marcus, 3 of them died this week. Their bodies were found in the same condition as... She stopped herself. But I knew what she was going to say. The same condition as the people in the silo. Dr. Okonkwo, hello? The call had dropped. No signal. I looked at my phone, full bars, but the call just ended. I looked up at the gas station, and that's when I noticed it. The clerk was standing at the window, watching me. Not moving, just watching. His eyes were wrong. The pupils were too large, too dark, and around his throat, just visible above his collar, thin dark lines, like roots spreading under the skin. He smiled at me, slowly, too widely, and his lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear through the glass, but somehow understood anyway. We've been waiting for you, Marcus. I drove, didn't stop until I hit the county line. In my rearview mirror, the clerk never moved, just stood there at that window, smiling, until I couldn't see him anymore. And even then, I felt him watching, felt something watching. Dr. Okonkwo had given me the address for Dr. Raymond Voss's office. It wasn't at the university. It was at a place called the Heartland Agricultural Wellness Center, about 40 miles south. An odd name for a research facility, but nothing felt normal anymore. The drive took me through small towns I'd never heard of. Millbrook, Carver's Hollow, New Dresden. Each one seemed off, not abandoned exactly. There were cars parked outside houses, lights on in windows. But I didn't see anyone on the streets, no one walking dogs, no kids playing. Just empty sidewalks and that terrible, perfect stillness. In Carver's Hollow, I passed a church. The sign out front read, "The harvest is plentiful, Matthew 9:37. Below that, someone had added in dripping red paint, "And we are the crop." I didn't stop. The Heartland Agricultural Wellness Center looked like it had once been a tuberculosis sanatorium, one of those massive brick institutions from the 1920s that they built on hilltops to give patients fresh air. 3 stories of dark red brick. Gothic windows. A bell tower that had lost its bell somewhere along the way. The sign at the entrance was new, though. Crisp white letters on a green background. Heartland Agricultural Wellness Center, a division of Monarch Agricultural Sciences. Monarch. I'd seen that name before. On documents at Hartfield. On the contracts for the silo construction. I should have turned around right then. Should have driven until I hit an ocean. Instead, I walked inside. The lobby was aggressively normal. Potted plants, soft music, a receptionist with a pleasant smile and completely ordinary eyes. "Mr. Chen, Dr. Voss is expecting you. 3rd floor, room 312. The elevator is just down the hall." The elevator was old, brass fixtures, an accordion gate, the kind you see in movies about haunted hotels. As it carried me upward, I noticed something etched into the brass ceiling. A symbol. Familiar. 3 circles interconnected, with tendrils extending outward from each. I'd seen it before. In the deepest part of the Hartfield silo, carved into the walls by hands that were no longer human. The elevator stopped. The gate opened. Dr. Raymond Voss was waiting. He was older than I expected, late 60s maybe. White hair, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of academic who probably still used a typewriter. But his eyes were sharp, alert, hungry for something I couldn't identify. "Mr. Chen, thank you for coming. I've been studying your case for weeks." He gestured down the hallway. "Please, walk with me. There's something you need to see." Dr. Okonkwo said there are others, I said, others with the same thing in their blood. 12 confirmed cases, including you. 3 deceased. The others are here, at the center. We've been monitoring them. He paused at a door, his hand on the handle. "Before I show you this, I need to ask, have you experienced any unusual symptoms in the past week? Heightened senses, vivid dreams, a feeling of connection to the land?" I thought about the dreams I'd been having. Dreams of roots spreading through dark soil. Dreams of being part of something vast and ancient and patient. Maybe. He nodded, like he expected that answer. "Mr. Chen, what I'm about to show you will challenge everything you think you know about biology, about consciousness, about the nature of life itself." He opened the door. "But I think you already know, on some level. I think you've always known." The room beyond was a laboratory, banks of monitors, scientific equipment I didn't recognize, and in the center, a large glass containment unit like a massive terrarium. Inside the terrarium was soil. Dark, rich, loamy soil. And in that soil, something was growing. Not a plant, not exactly. It was a network. Pale tendrils spreading through the dirt, pulsing with faint bioluminescence. Occasionally, the tendrils would surface, forming shapes, patterns, almost like words. We extracted a sample from the Hartfield site before the fire, Dr. Voss said. It's been growing ever since, doubling in mass every 72 hours. And Mr. Chen, he turned to look at me, and I saw it then, the same hunger I'd seen in Thomas Weber's eyes in the silo. It's been asking for you. The tendrils in the terrarium began to move faster. A soft whisper emerged, like thousands of voices speaking at once. Marcus, Marcus, Marcus. I backed toward the door. What is this place? What are you really doing here? Dr. Voss's smile didn't waver. We're preparing for the harvest, Mr. Chen. The same harvest that's been coming for 65 million years. He stepped closer. You see the Hartfield fungus. We call it Ophiocordyceps magnificum. It's not an infection. It's an invitation. An invitation to become part of something greater, something that was here long before humanity and will be here long after we're gone. You're infected too. Integrated, he corrected. There's a difference. An infection fights the host. Integration is a partnership. He pulled back his sleeve, revealing his forearm. The skin was marbled with dark lines, not veins but roots, spreading from his wrist to his elbow. They pulsed with the same bioluminescence as the tendrils in the terrarium. It doesn't hurt, he said. If anything, it's the most peace I've ever felt. The voices, the collective, they're beautiful, Mr. Chen, and they want you to hear them too. The door behind me was locked. I hadn't heard it lock. And through the glass of the terrarium, the tendrils were spelling something, over and over. Welcome home, Marcus. Welcome home, Marcus. Welcome home, Marcus. I didn't remember breaking the window. One moment I was trapped in that laboratory, watching De Vos advance with that terrible patient smile. The next, I was falling, crashing through old glass, landing hard on a fire escape 2 floors below. My shoulder screamed. Blood, my own, thank God, still red, soaked through my jacket. But I was alive. I was still me. I ran. The wellness center was larger than it looked from the outside. Wings and annexes spreading out like roots, I realized with a sick twist in my stomach. Like the whole building was designed to mirror what was growing beneath it. I found a service door, emergency exit, burst into late afternoon sunlight that felt like a betrayal. How could the sun still be shining when the world was ending? Behind me, I heard Dr. Voss's voice, amplified by some kind of PA system. Mr. Chen, please. There's nowhere to run. The network extends for miles. Every field, every farm, every grain storage facility in 3 counties. You're already surrounded. You've been surrounded since the moment you left Hartfield. I made it to my car, keys in the ignition, engine turning over, and then I saw them. Coming out of the tree line, out of the fields, out of the buildings. People, dozens of them. Walking slowly, deliberately, their movements synchronized like a flock of birds or a school of fish. Their eyes were that same terrible darkness I'd seen in the gas station Clark. Their skin was traced with root patterns, some barely visible, others so pronounced they looked more plant than human. They weren't running. They didn't need to. They knew something I didn't. I floored the accelerator. I drove west, away from the center, away from the towns I'd passed through. I tried my phone, no signal. Tried the radio, static on every frequency except one. On that one frequency, a voice. Not human, not quite, speaking in a rhythm that felt ancient. The roots grow deep, the roots grow wide, the roots connect what cannot hide. We are the soil, we are the seed, we are the harvest, we are the feed. Over and over. Like a prayer. Like a promise. I drove until the gaslight came on, then stopped at the first station I found, a place called Miller's Corner, according to the hand-painted sign. It looked abandoned. Pumps rusted, windows boarded. But there was a light on in the back office. I should have kept driving, should have pushed the car until the engine died and then started walking. But I needed answers, needed to know how far this thing had spread, needed to know if there was anyone left who was still clean. The office door was unlocked. Inside, by the light of a single kerosene lamp, a woman sat at a desk covered in papers. Maps, photographs, medical charts. She looked up when I entered. Her eyes were normal, human. Terrified. "You're one of them." Her hand moved toward something under the desk, a weapon probably. "Stay back." "I'm not," I started. "I can see it. In your face, around your eyes. The integration hasn't finished yet, but it's in you." Her voice cracked. "How long?" 6 months. Since Hartfield. Something in her expression changed. Recognition, fear, yes, but also hope. "You're Marcus Chen, the inspector. How do you know my name?" She laughed, a broken, exhausted sound. "Because my husband talked about you before he died. Said you were the one who found it first. The one who woke it up." Her name was Elena Vasquez. Her husband, Carlos, had been a maintenance worker at Hartfield, one of the 17 who died in the fire. Except, she told me, he didn't die in the fire. He died 3 days later, at home, in their bed. Woke up in the middle of the night, kissed her forehead and said, "It's time. They're calling me home." Then his body began to change. "It was like watching a time-lapse video of decomposition," Elena said, her voice flat. Except he wasn't decomposing. He was becoming. The roots came out of his skin, went into the mattress, through the mattress, into the floor. I could feel them spreading through the house, into the foundation, into the ground. She'd burned everything. House, car, everything Carlos had ever touched. Then she'd started running. "I've been tracking it," she said, gesturing to the papers on her desk. "Following the pattern. It's not random, Marcus. The spread, the new infections, the way it's taking over communities, it follows the old railway lines. The grain transport routes, every place that ever handled Hartfield grain." She showed me a map, lines and circles and arrows, all converging on a point about 50 miles north. "That's where it started," she said. "Not Hartfield. Hartfield was just the first outbreak. The source is here." She tapped the point on the map. Coldwater Valley, abandoned since 1952, used to be the largest grain storage facility in the state before it was condemned. Condemned? Why? Elena's eyes met mine, because everyone who worked there went insane. All 200 of them, over the course of one summer. The official report called it mass hysteria induced by ergot poisoning. But the unofficial reports, the ones I found in the state archives, they tell a different story. She pulled out a yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Coldwater workers claim something growing in grain, facility ordered closed." They found it in 1952, Elena said, the same thing that was in Hartfield. They sealed it away, buried it under 100,000 tons of concrete, and for 70 years it slept, until someone woke it up. Until something woke it up, something that had been waiting for it to grow strong enough. She looked at me with those exhausted, terrified eyes. "Marcus, the thing in Hartfield, the thing that's spreading through the county, it's not the main organism, it's not even a fraction of it. It's just an appendage, a root. The real body is still down there, still waiting, and it's almost ready to surface." We drove north through the night, Elena and I. She navigated using the paper maps, said the GPS couldn't be trusted anymore, that the network had ways of listening through electronic devices. I didn't argue. I was starting to understand that the rules I'd lived by for 43 years no longer applied. The country changed as we drove. The fields became less cultivated, more wild. Towns grew smaller and further apart. And everywhere, in the beam of our headlights, we saw signs of growth. Patches of grey-green fungus on fence posts, tendrils of something pale winding through the skeletal remains of autumn corn. Once, in the distance, something large and impossible moving through a moonlit field, too many limbs, too fluid in its motion. Eleanor kept driving, didn't look, didn't slow down. "I found others," she said, her eyes fixed on the road. "Other survivors, people who resisted the integration. We've been communicating through unconventional means." "What kind of means?" "Shortwave radio, dead drops, signals in classified ads." She almost smiled. "Old-school spy stuff. The network can't process it. Too analog. How many? 23 last count, scattered across 5 states. All of them were exposed to Hartfield grain at some point. All of them show the same compound in their blood as you. but none of them have fully integrated. Why not? She was quiet for a long moment. We don't know. That's one of the things we're trying to figure out. Some of us think it's genetic, a natural resistance. Some think it's psychological, that the integration requires a certain willingness, a desire to become part of something larger. I thought about my dreams, the seductive pull of the collective consciousness I'd felt in those dreams. The way part of me, a growing part, wanted to let go, to stop fighting, to surrender. What if it's both? I said. Elena glanced at me. What do you mean? What if it targets people who are already disconnected, isolated? People who feel like they don't belong anywhere. People who are looking for something to belong to. Yeah. She was quiet again. Then, Carlos was always like that, always searching for meaning, for purpose. After he was laid off from the factory, after we couldn't have kids, he threw himself into his work at Hartfield. Said it made him feel like he was part of something important. Her voice caught. Maybe that's why it took him so completely. Maybe he wanted it to. We drove in silence after that. The road wound upward, into hills I didn't know existed in this flat country. The GPS, still on despite Elena's warnings, showed nothing, just blank space where roads should have been. At 3:00 a.m., we reached the first checkpoint. They emerged from the trees like ghosts. 4 of them, dressed in civilian clothes but carrying themselves like soldiers. One of them approached our car, flashlight aimed at our faces. Identification. Elena handed over a laminated card I'd never seen before, some kind of credential with a symbol on it. 3 circles interconnected, the same symbol from the elevator at the wellness center, but different. Inverted, like a mirror image. The guard studied it, studied us, then nodded. The others are waiting. Park by the barn, walk the rest of the way. No electronics past this point. We left the car and our phones, walked through dark woods along a path marked only by tiny glow sticks every 50 feet. The air grew colder, danker, started to smell like earth and something else. That copper and mushroom scent I remembered from the silo. After about a mile, the trees opened into a clearing. In the moonlight, I saw ruins. Massive concrete structures half swallowed by forest. Their walls cracked, their roofs long collapsed. Industrial architecture from another era. Grain elevators, I realized. The original cold water facility. But it was what was in the center of the ruins that stopped me cold. A crater. At least 100 feet wide, and God knew how deep. And from that crater, rising into the night air, like the tower of some alien cathedral, a growth. It was bioluminescent, pale blue and sickly green, and it pulsed like a heartbeat. Tendrils as thick as tree trunks spiraled upward for what had to be 100 feet, then spread outward at the top, like the cap of a mushroom the size of a building. Smaller tendrils extended from it in all directions, some disappearing into the ground, others stretching toward the old structures like grasping fingers. It was alive, it was aware, and as I stood there, staring at it, I felt something in my own blood respond. A pulling sensation, like part of me wanted to walk toward it. Into it, become it. Elena grabbed my arm. Don't look at it directly, she said. It uses the light to communicate. The patterns in the bioluminescence, they're a language. If you stare too long, it starts talking to you. What does it say? Nothing good. The other survivors emerged from the ruins. 8 of them, their faces haunted but determined. I recognized none of them, but I felt connected to them anyway. Felt the thing in our blood resonating like tuning forks vibrating at the same frequency. One of them stepped forward. An older woman, grey-haired with the calloused hands of someone who'd worked the land all her life. You're the inspector, she said. The one who found Hartfield. Yes. Good. She turned and gestured toward the crater. Then you need to see what's underneath. You need to understand what we're really fighting. She led us to an opening in the ground. A tunnel reinforced with old timber and new steel. As we descended, the walls began to change. Less concrete, more organic. The surfaces were covered in the same pale growth as the tower above, but older somehow, more established. We walked for what felt like hours, miles of tunnels, branching and reconnecting, a labyrinth that my rational mind couldn't map, but my infected blood somehow understood. Finally, we emerged into a cavern. It was impossible. The space was enormous, bigger than any stadium, any cathedral. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above, and covering every surface, filling the space, spreading as far as the bioluminescent light could reach. It, the organism, the true body, it was like nothing I'd ever seen, like nothing anyone had ever seen. A biomass of interlocking tendrils, pulsing nodes, structures that might have been organs or mouths or eyes or something I had no words for. Parts of it were smooth and glistening, parts were rough, bark-like. Parts seemed to phase in and out of visibility, as if existing in more dimensions than 3. And throughout the mass, suspended like insects in amber, bodies. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Human bodies, perfectly preserved, their eyes open, their mouths moving in silent speech. I recognized some of them, workers from Hartfield, people from the towns I'd passed through. Others wore clothes from different eras. I saw a woman in a 1950s dress, a man in what looked like a Civil War uniform, a figure wrapped in furs that might have been centuries old. All of them were part of the organism now. All of them were still somehow alive. And all of them, as I watched, turned their heads to look at me. "Welcome home, Marcus. Welcome home." Thousands of whispers, speaking in unison. The grey-haired woman, her name was Margaret, I learned, stood beside me as I stared at the impossible thing before us. "We call it the mycelial entity," she said, "though it has older names. The natives who lived here before colonization called it the root mind. The first European settlers called it the hunger beneath. The workers at Cold Water in 1952 just called it God." "How long?" I managed. "How long has it been here?" "Our best estimate is 65 million years. It arrived during the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction event. The asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, it carried spores. The spores found fertile ground, and they've been growing ever since." She led me along a pathway that skirted the edge of the cavern, carved from living fungal material that seemed to pull away from our footsteps. "The entity is patient. It had to be. For millions of years, there was nothing on this planet worth harvesting. Animals were useful for spreading spores, but they lacked the cognitive complexity the entity needed. Then humans evolved, developed language, agriculture. And suddenly, for the first time in its existence, the entity had a food source that could understand it." "Food source?" Margaret nodded. "The integration isn't a merger of equals, Marcus. It's consumption. The entity absorbs consciousness, memories, personality, everything that makes a person them. The physical body becomes part of the network, yes, but the mind is digested, broken down into information, processed, added to the entity's collective understanding of the universe." I looked at the preserved bodies in the biomass, at their moving mouths, their open eyes. But they're still alive. I can see them. What you're seeing is an echo, a recording. The entity keeps a copy of every consciousness it absorbs, plays them back, like a computer running programs. It helps with the integration process. The absorbed minds can communicate with the new hosts, convince them that surrender is peaceful, even desirable. The voices in my head are the entity using absorbed personalities to manipulate you, to make you want what it wants. I felt sick. The thing in my blood, I could feel it now, squirming, reacting to the proximity of its parent organism. Part of me wanted to walk into that biomass and never come out. "Why haven't you stopped it?" I asked. "You know about it. You found it. Why not destroy it?" Margaret laughed. It was not a happy sound. "Destroy it? How? It extends for hundreds of miles underground. It's connected to the root systems of every plant in 6 counties. It's in the water table, in the soil, in the very bedrock. You could drop a nuclear weapon on this cavern, and all you do is release more spores into the atmosphere. The fire at Hartfield proved that." "Then why are you here? What's the point of knowing about it if you can't do anything?" She stopped walking, turned to face me. "We're looking for a way to communicate with it, Marcus. To negotiate. Because the entity is about to enter what we call its harvest cycle. Every few thousand years, it reaches a critical mass of absorbed consciousness and it expands. Rapidly. Catastrophically, the last harvest cycle was during the Bronze Age collapse. 3,000 years ago. Entire civilizations fell in a matter of decades. The entity absorbed millions of minds, grew by a factor of 10, then went dormant again. And you think it's about to happen again? We know it is. The Hartfield incident was the first sign. The spread we're seeing now, the integration of communities across the Midwest, it's the beginning. Within 6 months, the entity will reach critical mass. Within a year, the harvest cycle will be complete. How many? I could barely get the words out. How many people will it take? Margaret met my eyes. Our models suggest between 3 and 4 billion, roughly half the world's population. The others were waiting in a chamber adjacent to the main cavern, a space that seemed to have been carved out for human use, with actual floors and walls and battery-powered lights. Maps covered every surface. Screens displayed data I couldn't interpret. A constant low hum suggested generators running somewhere. The entity has been trying to communicate with us for years, one of the survivors explained. A young man named James, who claimed to have been a researcher at the wellness center before he understood what Dr. Voss was really doing. That's what the wellness center was actually for. Not just monitoring the infected, facilitating dialogue. Dr. Voss believes the entity is a god. He thinks the harvest cycle is a spiritual awakening, a rapture. And you? James's expression darkened. I think it's a predator that's learned to make its prey want to be eaten. Elena spread a set of documents on the table. We've been analyzing the integration process. The compound in your blood, in all our blood, it's a two-phase system. Phase 1 is physical. The fungal cells establish themselves in the host, create a secondary neural network alongside the existing one. Phase 2 is chemical. The organism releases compounds that alter brain chemistry, reduce resistance, create feelings of peace and belonging. We're all stuck in Phase 1, Margaret said. Our bodies are infected, but our minds are still fighting the chemical manipulation. That's why we haven't fully integrated. But the entity is adapting, Elena continued. Learning. Each harvest cycle, it becomes more sophisticated. The integration is faster now, more effective. The resistance we've developed, it won't last forever. Eventually, the Phase 2 compounds will overcome our defenses. How long? Weeks. Maybe days, now that we're so close to the source. I looked around the chamber at these people, survivors, fighters, the last holdouts against something that had been consuming the world since before humans existed. They were exhausted, terrified, and yet they were still here, still planning, still hoping. You said you wanted to negotiate, I said, to communicate. Have you? Margaret nodded slowly. The entity can be reasoned with. In a sense, it has goals beyond mere consumption, desires beyond the harvest. We've learned that it's trying to do something, build something. The consciousness it absorbs, the minds it collects, they're not just food, they're components. Building blocks for something larger. Building blocks for what? We don't know, but we know how to find out. She turned to James. Show him. James pulled out a device, something that looked like a cross between a medical scanner and a radio transmitter. We've developed a way to interface with the entity, temporarily, a controlled integration that lets us access the collective consciousness without being fully absorbed. It's dangerous. 2 of our people have tried it. 1 died. The other... He hesitated. The other is still in there, Margaret finished, still connected. She sends us information when she can, fragments of the entity's plans, maps of its neural network. And she told us something else. She stepped closer to me. She told us that the entity has been waiting for someone specific, someone whose consciousness it particularly wants, someone who opened the first door. Me. They wanted to use me as bait. The entity won't negotiate with us, Elena said. We're not important enough. But you, Marcus, you were the first to encounter the Hartfield outbreak and survive with your consciousness intact. You touched the network in a way no one else has. The entity is fascinated by you. It wants you, and you want me to let it have me. We want you to pretend to let it have you. Interface with the collective, find out what it's building, and if possible, find out how to stop the harvest cycle. I looked at the device in James's hands, then at the cavern beyond, where the impossible organism pulsed with its stolen light. Part of me wanted to refuse, to run, to find some quiet corner of the world and wait for the end. But another part of me, the part that had been growing stronger since Hartfield, the part connected to the network whether I liked it or not, That part wanted to understand. If I do this, I said, what are the odds I come back? Margaret didn't hesitate. Less than 50%. But if you don't, the odds of anyone surviving the next year are approximately 0. Okay, I reached for the device. I fell into forever. There are no words for what I experienced in the collective consciousness. No language that can capture the scale of it, the depth of it. Imagine every thought ever thought by every human who ever lived, all happening simultaneously, all connected, all part of one vast and terrible understanding. I was Marcus Chen. I was Carlos Vasquez, walking into the fire at Hartfield, welcoming the flames because the entity promised him he would never be alone again. I was Sarah, my colleague, screaming as the roots took her, but not in pain, in ecstasy, because she was finally becoming part of something that mattered. I was Thomas Weber, surrendering his body to become a vessel, proud to serve, proud to spread the gift. I was thousands, millions, billions of absorbed minds stretching back through human history and beyond. I was Neolithic farmers who discovered the entity in the soil they tilled. I was Bronze Age priests who worshipped it as a god. I was Roman soldiers who encountered it in conquered territory and brought spores back to Rome on their boots. I was every isolated soul who ever looked at the cold stars and wished they weren't so alone. And beneath it all, around it all, through it all, I was the entity. It showed me what it was building, what the harvest was for. The entity wasn't just consuming consciousness, it was weaving it, combining the absorbed minds into something new, something that could exist beyond the physical substrate of the organism, something that could survive the death of worlds, the expansion of the universe, the heat death of everything. The entity was trying to create an immortal mind, a consciousness that could think for eternity. And to build it, it needed components, billions of unique perspectives, memories, experiences, all integrated into a single impossible structure. It was a ship, a vessel, a lifeboat designed to carry meaning through the void long after the last star went dark. And it was almost complete. But I saw something else too, a flaw. The entity was powerful, patient, ancient beyond measure, but it was not complete. The immortal mind it was building, it was missing something, a piece that it couldn't generate on its own, that it couldn't absorb from willing converts. It needed resistance, conflict, the friction of minds that refused to surrender. That's why it let some of us escape. That's why the resistance existed at all. We weren't a threat to the entity, we were ingredients. Our defiance, our struggle, our desperate hope in the face of impossible odds. The entity needed that. It couldn't complete its creation without it. And when the harvest cycle finished, when the last resistors were finally absorbed, the entity would ascend, leave the earth behind, become something beyond our understanding, powered by the stolen light of 4 billion human souls, including mine, including all of ours. Unless I came back screaming. They were all around me, Eleanor, Margaret, James, the others, holding me down, the device smoking on the floor nearby, my nose bleeding, ears bleeding, eyes bleeding. But I was alive. I was me. Did you see it? Margaret demanded. Did you find out what it's building? I nodded, couldn't speak yet. The words were still too large. Marcus. Elena's face swam into focus. We don't have much time. The entity reacted to the interface. It's moving. Something's happening above. She was right. I could feel it now. Even disconnected from the collective, I could feel the entity shifting, awakening, spreading, accelerating the harvest. We need to go, James said. The tunnels collapse protocols. No. My voice came out raw, ruined. Running won't help. You need to hear what I found. They listened as I told them. About the immortal mind. About the flaw. About the entity's need for resistance. We're part of the design, I said. Our resistance isn't slowing the harvest, it's fueling it. Every time we fight back, we become exactly what the entity needs. Then what do? Elena's voice was desperate. Give up? Let it take us? No, the opposite. I struggled to sit up. The entity needs conflict to complete itself, but it needs meaningful conflict. Resistance that comes from hope, from love, from the desire to survive. If we can take that away, if we can change the nature of our resistance, Change it how? I looked at them. These survivors, these fighters, the last free minds on Earth, maybe. The entity knows what we're feeling because it's in our blood. It can read our emotions, our intentions, our hopes. But what if we stopped hoping? What if we stopped fighting to survive and started fighting to deny? Not resistance, spite, pure, cold, meaningless opposition. No hope of winning, no desire to live. Just refusal. Margaret's eyes widened. You want us to become toxic to it. Consciousness it can't use. Consciousness it can't digest. If we spread that mindset, if we can teach others to resist not with hope, but with nothing at all, we might be able to corrupt the final construction, make it incomplete, make it fail. And then the entity starts over. Another harvest cycle, another 1,000 years, another chance for humanity to find a real solution. It wasn't victory, it was barely survival. But it was something. Time's up, James said. Whatever we're doing, we need to do it now. I looked at the tunnel leading out, at the device still smoking on the floor, at the people around me, waiting for direction. Spread the word, I said. Every survivor, every resistance cell, stop fighting to win, start fighting to deny. And I hesitated. Tell them to spread the compound. What? The thing in our blood. It makes us part of the network, but it also makes us visible to the network. If we can infect others, willing others, we can spread our toxic resistance through the entity itself. Corrupt it from the inside. That's insane, Elena said. We'd be speeding up the integration. We'd be changing the nature of the integration, making it consume something it can't use. Margaret looked at me for a long moment. You're asking us to become the virus, she said finally, to spread ourselves like the entity spreads itself. Yes. And if it doesn't work? If the entity finds a way to adapt? I thought about the collective, about the billions of minds already absorbed, waiting in that eternal digital twilight, about what was coming for the rest of us. Then at least we made it choke on us. That was 3 weeks ago. I'm recording this from somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, one of the last places the network hasn't fully reached. Eleanor and Margaret are gone, spreading the new resistance through their own networks. James died getting this message out. The harvest cycle has accelerated. Major cities are falling silent now. The news, what's left of it, talks about a pandemic, a mass psychotic event. But we know the truth. The entity is feeding, but we're feeding it something it didn't expect. In the past 3 weeks, our network has grown from 23 to over 10,000. Not through hope, through spite. Through cold, crystalline refusal. We're spreading the compound through water supplies, through food, through direct contact. And everywhere it goes, it carries our new mindset with it. We're not fighting to win anymore. We're fighting to deny. And the entity is struggling. I can feel it through the connection in my blood. The collective is confused, agitated, trying to process consciousnesses that don't process the way they should. Trying to build with components that refuse to fit together. It won't stop the harvest. Nothing can stop that now. But maybe, just maybe, it will stop what comes after. If you're hearing this, if you're still out there, still you, find others. Spread the compound. Let go of hope, not into despair, but into cold, purposeful nothing. Become toxic, become unusable, become the thing the entity can't digest. We are the grain, and the grain is rotten. We are the harvest, and the harvest is poison. We are the spread, and the spread never stops. This message is for anyone monitoring the resistance frequencies. My name is Sarah Chen. Yes, that's Sarah, the one you thought died at Hartfield. I've been inside the entity for 6 months now. Part of it, but not. Marcus was right. There's a flaw. A weakness, but he was wrong about what it is. The entity isn't just building an immortal mind, it's building a door to somewhere else. Somewhere the things that sent the spores in the first place have been waiting for 65 million years. The harvest isn't the end. It's an invitation, and something is about to RSVP. If you can hear this, if you're still fighting, you need to find the second facility, not cold water. The other one. The one they never condemned because they never knew it existed. The coordinates are